And we are live, I believe. So, I'm not going to bury the lead. This week in D&D news, Wizards of the Coast Hasbro have laid off a reported 90% of staff on their Project Sigil virtual tabletop. Does this mean that Project Sigil is cancelled, and what impact is this going to have as the D&D hobby as a whole? We'll get into that today on This Week in D&D. So, as I said, as reported by Rascal News, and indeed I was getting whispers of this yesterday lunchtime UK time, which is about early morning yesterday Eastern time, I guess, in America. So the start of the working day over in the United States, the Wizards of the Coast was laying people off from Project Sigil, the 3D virtual tabletop which was hailed as the future of 1D&D. And the digital offerings of Dungeons & Dragons only 12 months ago. Well, unfortunately, a lot of people have lost their jobs. And things are not looking too great. And indeed, only a few hours later, confirmation via social media posts of the workers of Wizards of the Coast that were laid off. And indeed reported by Rascal News. It looks as though those rumours were true. So I'm going to go through this Rascal News article and then I'll give some thoughts as to what we're seeing here, because I do think that the writing was on the wall for some time here. This is an article written by Chase Carter, stating that a lack of corporate interest and poor internal communications reportedly stymied some success here for Project Sigil. So Wizards of the Coast laid off 30 people from the internally produced Sigil virtual tabletop project on March 18th, not including contracted workers, effectively ending active development only a month after the ambitious software's rocky public playtest. A former Wizards of the Coast employee who wished to remain anonymous shared with Rascal a screenshot of the internal message sent to staff. It stated that majority of the Sigil team had been let go except for a skeleton crew tasked with folding the project's existing features into D&D Beyond. Later that day, a senior game rules specialist, Andy Collins, confirmed several details in a LinkedIn post where the self-described de facto design lead on Sigil said approximately 30 talented developers, 90% of the team, were laid off from the Sigil team at Wizards of the Coast, including yours truly. This is the full text of the internal statement here. So, dear team, I wanted to share an important update regarding Sigil. After several months of alpha testing, we've concluded that our aspirations for Sigil as a larger, standalone game with a distinct monetization path will not be realized. As such, we cannot maintain a large development effort, and most of the Sigil team will be separated from the company this week. We are, however, proud of what Sigil team has developed and want to make sure that fans and players on D&D Beyond can use it. To that end, we will transition Sigil to a D&D Beyond feature. We will maintain a small team to sustain Sigil and release products already developed at no additional cost to users. To those moving on as a result of this decision, we will provide robust support, including severance packages, 2024 bonus, career placement services, and internal opportunities where possible. I want to take a moment to praise the entire Sigil team for their incredible work to deliver this product to our community. One of the things I'm most proud of here at D&D is our strong sense of purpose. We aim to honour our current players while ensuring D&D continues to build connections and bring joy to future generations. And that's what the Sigil team was doing. Although we haven't fully realised our vision for Sigil to scale, the team should be proud of their achievements. Rascal apparently contacted Wizards of the Coast for comment, but did not receive a reply prior to publication. An addendum, an update here. Collins has confirmed to Rascal that Dan Rawson, Senior Vice President of Dungeons & Dragons and Hasbro Direct, sent the internal message and led the in-person layoff announcement. So Rascal spoke with one of the affected workers who also asked to remain anonymous, and they confirmed the text of the internal message. They said that the Sigil team was notified on Monday that all but 3 team members would be laid off. A manager facilitating the meeting claimed that the company may return to the project one day if enough interest was shown, but that it will currently exist as a perk for master tier subscribers to D&D Beyond. The employee told Rascal that the atmosphere surrounding work on Sigil had felt off and increasingly strained since late last year, following a somewhat disastrous tech demo as part of a Gen Con 2024 performance that featured Abria Iyengar, Brennan Lee Monaghan, Anjalia Binmani, and Baldur's Gate 3 actors Neil Newborn and Samantha Beat. Hasbro president Chris Cox became involved in the project for the first time soon after, and was reportedly not very supportive of continued development. The anonymous employee believes development was likely cancelled internally around December, and the last 3 months constituted a last-ditch effort to create the best product possible, spearheaded by project lead Chris Kao. Unlike virtual tabletops such as Roll20, Owlbear Rodeo, and Foundry, Sigil advertised a fully 3D environment with map building tools that would allow users to create and share interactive environments with their players. The first public playtest launched earlier this year and delivered a decidedly incomplete version of the promised dream of moving miniatures around a lushly decorated tavern while maintaining digital character sheets through seamless integration with D&D Beyond. Sigil's sudden death was more of a murder, according to the employee. They described a company-wide lack of coordination during their tenure, where they never interacted with the book publishing team and only stumbled into the already existing Maps VTT by accidentally signing up for an internal playtest, believing it was Sigil instead. In fact, the employee claims Watch the Engineers would constantly clash with D&D Beyond staff over access to the latter's fiercely protected internal data. Sigil's original version was to eventually move beyond D&D to encompass My Little Pony, Transformers, and the rest of Hasbro's vaunted licensed portfolio. Over time, the team narrowed the scope to creating a D&D application for PC and mobile devices that integrated D&D Beyond data and usability. The team apparently always felt as though they performed miracles with a limited set of tools, constantly moving goalposts, and a distinct lack of interest from Hasbro management until the end. Project development apparently suffered from a lack of corporate leadership throughout its lifetime, first from Wizards of the Coast inexperience as a video game studio, which I'm sure we'll come back to in a moment, and later from a distinct lack of interest in what Kao and his team were creating. The employee ascribed this disconnect to the company's outdated standards and a bureaucratic morass everyone wades through to complete work or communicate with other teams. The employee believes that Hasbro treated Sigil like a video game instead of a VTT, and at no point cared to understand the difference. While public perception focused on monetization from the jump, the company apparently expected Sigil to create revenue in a similar fashion to Magic the Gathering or Baldur's Gate 3 simply by existing. When that proved not to be the case, the employer said Hasbro pushed Sigil out the nest and were uninterested if it managed to fly before crashing to the earth, which is kind of my take as well, which we'll get to in a moment. The employee described a meeting only a month ago where Collins asked leadership about their vision for Sigil going forward, and nobody was able to provide a clear answer. Sigil's team was also affected by the December 2023 layoffs at Hasbro, according to the employee. Both contractors and full-time staff were lost amongst approximately 1,100 people who were fired 2 weeks before Christmas, a move Hasbro and other companies regularly deploy. Those left over estimated that the annual salary of all 1,100 employees would be covered by the executive bonuses awarded to Hasbro's C-suite in 2023. Judging on the size of the team and rough salaries, the employee estimated that Hasbro invested between 20 and 30 million into Sigil so far. Now, 3 remaining engineers will work with an apparently much more amenable D&D Beyond team to wheel the once celebrated jewel in D&D's digital crown into the background of an existing and already popular VTT. We will update this piece with any more information or comments from Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro as they come in. And apparently there was an update that clarified that Wizards of the Coast's president was not present at the firing of Sigil's team. So, a lot there to say the least. And I have a lot of thoughts. So, let's go from the top here. So, first of all, I feel terrible for the 30 staff that will have lost their jobs here. Hopefully, they're going to get more jobs soon, and hopefully maybe even internally within Wizards of the Coast for them. So I feel awful for them for a start. But I suspect, and particularly after reading some of these reports from the internals and the internal operations of Hasbro, I strongly suspect that many members of the TTRPG community, particularly long-standing members of the TTRPG community, and those that have been involved in this hobby for well before 5th edition's arrival, are probably breathing a bit of a sigh of relief here. Because I think there was definitely concern that Wizards of the Coast, and Hasbro in particular, were trying to push out a product that was going to do some of these things that this article essentially all but confirms was the intent, which is microtransactions and trying to bring people into this walled garden, and indeed turning this VTT into a video game. In fact, it says here that... what was it? That... the employees believes that Hasbro treated Sigil like a video game instead of a VTT and at no point cared to understand the difference. And that, I think, was what the TTRPG community was really concerned was the case. However, this is admittedly not a surprise for me here, personally. It was very clear that this launch was a rush job in the end. And I think this whole project has been delayed. Not delayed. Well, it has been delayed, but that wasn't the word I was going to use. Plagued was the word I was going to use with difficulties and problems. This was originally set to launch on beta, I believe it was, in the autumn, alongside the release of the 2024 Player's Handbook, and it didn't come. Not only did it not come, but it was also completely silent. There was no updates, no nothing. Everything behind the scenes went dead. I don't quite know what they mean in this article about a disastrous demonstration. Perhaps it wasn't well received, but I watched the Gen Con demonstration because I was intrigued by Project Sigil, and I thought they did a pretty good job, actually. In fact, it got me mildly intrigued on something that I was otherwise not particularly interested with. So I'm not quite sure what that disastrous launch supposedly was, but there we are. But it went quiet. We heard nothing all the way through to the end of 2024, and I think there were many of us thinking, well, surely it's going to launch the end of 2024, right? Because, it's the end of 2024, and you said that it was going to be in testing in at least autumn 2024. So surely we're not going to go into the new year, but we did, and then it was quiet again, and then there was a bit of a push for testers, alpha testers, on the quiet, and then it launched into open beta, even though nowhere is it ever published to say that it's an open beta. It just kind of quietly launched, although internally and on the Discord they're saying, oh, this is just an open beta, this isn't the full launch, which is a good job because it was truly lacking. But there was also no fanfare on social media. There was no marketing push for it. It launched really quietly. And it also launched with no Mac support, no mobile support, even though that was one of the big features that they were trying to push, that it was going to work across all platforms, consoles, everything. There was no word of that, no timeline for support for other platforms. There were features missing. You couldn't even get minis for all of the playable races. There was a very small amount of dungeon building elements. I actually had to watch loads of people streaming it and demonstrating it because I couldn't use it because I use a Mac, and I think a lot of content creators use Macs. I know there are a lot of people that are in the hobby that use Macs, but that was a big problem in of itself, because how are you're launching a product, but you're not launching a single player video game where you only need one computer. You need every single member of the group to have a computer, and you're also dictating by launching, I mean, not dictating, but you kind of are, by launching only on Windows and no other platform. You're also kind of dictating that every member of the group has to use a Windows PC, and if let's say the market share of Macs is 20%, I'm not quite sure what the market share is, but I think that's probably a very conservative estimate at this point in time, of personal computers, so non-work related computers, 20% of our Macs, then one person in every D&D group statistically is going to be using a Mac, which means that almost every D&D group statistically is not going to be able to use Project Sigil. So of course it died on the vine, because nobody can use it. Because what you're going to say to the guy that's got a Mac, oh, sorry, you can't play, you're out of the group now. Like, it's what the hell? And there were features missing, and as I say, you couldn't even get a miniature for all of the playable races within the D&D core rules. Never mind all the other stuff, which felt like a rushed launch, and it felt to me at the time like they were trying to push it out to get it out before the end of the quarter so that they could boost their earnings. Or at least the perception of earnings, and please the shareholders. Because that was the only way I could make the launch make sense. That it's like, yeah, it's done now. We've done it. But the problem is anybody that knows anything about software, certainly consumer software and video games, and I said this on our own Discord server at the time, is if you launch a game or a bit of software and it gets a stink on it at launch because it's buggy or featureless or just rubbish, then that stink is very hard to get rid of. There are many bits of software that I can speak to. I'm an Apple fanboy and I'm an Apple apologist here. I've just said I use a Mac, right? But Apple Maps is a prime example. That launched, God, it's got to be over 10 years ago, at least 10 years ago. In fact, no, I think it was probably about 12 years ago now, Apple Maps. It doesn't really matter how long. About a decade ago, roughly. And it launched, and it wasn't great. It was bad. There was bad data. It was sending people in the wrong way. And Apple Maps is now very good. It's a very good bit of software. But people don't use it because it's got a bad reputation. You think of Destiny being a video game that launched with loads of bugs. And that's got a bad reputation. In fact, they had to release a sequel just to kind of try and build that reputation back. It's very rare that bits of software launch are bad and then later on people revisit them. You've got that first impression counts with a bit of software, definitely. And the first impressions weren't good, and that makes sense now. Seeing what it says in the article, where they say here that that when Sigil proved. Hasbro pushed Sigil out the nest and were uninterested if it managed to fly before crashing to Earth. Yeah, I think they pushed it out. They wanted to get it out, they wanted to get it launched, so then they could wipe their hands of it. And I wonder if, in all honesty, there's a little bit of Hollywood accounting going on here, where at least they can claim the expenses because it's launched and didn't do very well. And then they can claim the expenses and get the tax write-offs and stuff. I wonder if there's a little bit of that going on here. But it's interesting. There's a lot of interesting things here. I just kind of want to scroll through again and just kind of catch a few things. Apparently they reckoning that they may return to the project if enough interest is shown. But it's only going to currently exist as a master tier perk for subscribers for D&D Beyond. Now, my understanding was, and I think this may be part of the problem here, with the way that Wizards of the Coast have communicated a lot of this stuff, is my understanding was that it was always going to be integrated to D&D Beyond, and it was always going to be through that platform that you accessed it. That this was going to be an extension of D&D Beyond into a 3D VTT. It suggests to me that there wasn't really, and kind of this article kind of confirms it as well, there wasn't really a vision for this. There wasn't a vision, because at the same time, they also launched the D&D Beyond maps here, the maps VTT, the 2D VTT, which have people who were working on the 3D VTT accidentally signed up for, thinking that it was an internal playtest for the one that they were working on. So whilst they're building this 3D VTT, Hasbro launches a 2D VTT, a competitor. Now look, you have the innovator's dilemma. You want to cannibalize your own product to see which one's more popular and put yourself out of business before somebody else puts you out of business. That's good business practice. But you hadn't even launched a 3D VTT and you launched a 2D VTT. And I didn't understand the move at the time. I don't understand the move now. And I don't think, frankly, Wizards of the Coast Hasbro understood the move either. I don't know if it was because they were trying to do some damage control on the OGL, which we'll get to in a moment as well. But I'm not fully certain here. Let's see what else was said. Yeah, so I don't really understand what this idea about it being a disastrous tech demo here. But apparently afterwards, Chris Cox became involved with Project Sigil and started to not be very supportive of continued development. So he was seemingly disappointed here, which I am surprised by, because look, I'm very much of the opinion that I don't think that the 3D VTT from Wizards of the Coast with microtransactions and things like that was going to be good for the hobby in the long run. From my personal opinion is I'm kind of relieved that Hasbro have abandoned this project. I'm relieved, because I think it wasn't going to be good for the hobby as a whole. Not because I don't believe in VTTs. I use VTTs. I love VTTs. I think they can actually make the game far easier to run. But I don't feel as though at least the people at the top of Hasbro calling the shots believed that that was the reason to create a VTT. I believe that's what the creatives involved and the developers wanted to do. They wanted to make a great experience, a virtual tabletop, almost like toy box experience, kind of akin to Tailspire, but officially supporting D&D. You can use D&D IP, But as a business perspective, if I was looking at this as a businessman, like, it was completely the right move for Hasbro to do. Like, I completely support. If I was CEO of Hasbro, I would have been pushing for this as well. I'll be honest, because it just makes so much business sense. I don't know how they managed to screw this up, quite frankly. I do not know how they managed to screw this up, because I use VTTs, I use Foundry. Most people are playing D&D online these days. Less people are playing in person. I run 6 to 7 campaigns. Only one of those is in person. And that's only once a month at best if we can get everybody together in the room, whereas my online ones are every week because nobody has to go anywhere. They just have to log into their computer and log into Foundry, which is the VTT that I use, right? So, and I can tell you that to get a good quality, like high production value, because I have a theatre background, I like to create high production value experiences for my players, and I put a lot of work and a lot of hours into it. I could prep a D&D session in half an hour if I wanted to, but I want a fully rich immersive experience, and as much of that as I can possibly get for my players to really bring them into the world, right? And that takes me hours. I hand select the token art that I want to use for each individual token. I then hand select the artwork, and I will only use maps that match the art style that I like to use for all of my maps, so I have to sometimes go real digging deep into the depths of Google and Reddit and everything to find the maps that fit the art style that I like, or I have to make my own. And then I will like to use all the sound effects, and I like to make sure that the minis match up with the art, and, I try to go high production value. And it takes me hours. I spend hours and hours and hours producing that high production value. Now, if you said to me, you know what, Wayne, you can have that. You can run Curse of Strahd. We're going to charge you money. We'll talk about what is a reasonable price in a minute. We're going to charge you money. You have the book already, so you have the adventure, right? But we're going to charge you money to create everything you need to run this a 3D VTT. We're going to program all of it. Castle Ravenloft is built. The village of Barovia is built. The Amber Temple is built. Kresk is built. It's all there. If you said that to me, and you said, and also you've got all of the 3D minis for every NPC and monster, they're all there. All of the adventure is all the tooltips are on. So when you hover over the doll in Blinsky's toy shop, there's a little thing that tells you about what it looks like, and Is no fun, is no Blinsky, etc., etc. You just give us money, click a few buttons, and that's in. That's loaded, preloaded, all done. All you then have to do is tell the story and roll the dice. Like, if you said that to me, right, we know how much Beadle and Grimm's charges for their physical products. Like, it's like $200 plus for these physical things with all the little knickknacks and stuff. You produce that digitally, as well as the immersive environments with all the sound effects, all the music, you create soundtracks and everything. Like, are you telling me that you're not going to be able to print money with that? If you're Hasbro, you don't think you can you look at that and you don't think you can print money with that anymore? Like that's, to me, that feels like mismanagement not from the creatives and not from the developers, but from the people at the top. This could potentially be printing money. However, we also know that they ballsed it up with the OGL, right? They ballsed it up with the OGL. There's no denying that is what happened here, unfortunately, because that's what they were gunning for. It's clear as day. What was it that they said here? Hang on. They said in here that... Here we go, yeah. While public perception focused on monetization from the jump, which they did because of all the things that we know publicly about what everybody's saying, the company apparently expected Sigil to create revenue in a similar fashion to Magic the Gathering or Baldur's Gate 3, which I agree it could have done, but then here's the caveat: simply by existing. When that proved not to be the case, the employee said Hasbro pushed Sigil out the nest and were uninterested if it managed to fly before crashing to Earth. Now, I wonder here how much there was internal politics at play here, because I don't know how. Let's assume that everything here is 100% correct here, because I like the guys at Rascal News and things like that. So let's assume that everything is good and kosher here. When that proved not to be the case, well, when did that prove to not be the case? Because the thing only launched quietly a month ago. So when did that prove to not be the case, that it wasn't going to make money simply by existing? Because they weren't charging anybody anything for it other than the tiers and the subscriptions. Maybe they were expecting subscriptions to go up and they didn't. But that's not where this was going to make a ton of money. This wasn't where it was going to make a ton of money. It wasn't going to make a ton of money off of subscriptions. This was going to make a ton of mones off of microtransactions, which, I don't think was necessarily good for the hobby. But from a business perspective, made perfect sense. You say, as I say, do that example of a Curse of Strahd module. You just click on it, plug it in, and go. You got all the 3D assets. You've got everything. All pre-programmed, all pre-built, everything you need. Basically, Curse of Strahd, the VTT experience video game. I'm going to put it out there. You could have charged top dollar for that. You could have charged AAA game level money for that. You could have easily. And you do that. I mean, how many fully published adventures have they got? Officially published. I've got a bookshelf full, going up to Journeys of the Radiant Citadel. Most of those are adventures. Like, think how many times over you can charge for that. There's hundreds of, maybe even thousands of dollars up for grabs that they've left on the table. So I don't know when they decided that it wasn't going to make enough money. Because I don't feel like they executed it. Simon, I'd like to admit some responsibility for this, as in my feedback to WotC, that I would never pay microtransactions for more features for Sigil. I mean, yeah, maybe that was the feedback thing. Yeah, thank you for that, Simon. Maybe they were getting a lot of that from feedback. And if so, I think, to be honest, the OGL thing has come back to bite them there, because I think it was that really started to make people think, this isn't about the hobby anymore. This is about just making as much money as damn possible from nickeling and diming people. And let's talk about nickeling and diming people, because over on here, on the Project Sigil website, this was the thing that really made me go, ooh, okay. So you got features and content here. All good. Yeah, single player mode. Yep, tick, tick. Multiplayer rooms, tick, tick. Introductory adventure, tick, tick. That's all included. Host multiplayer rooms. Yep, good. Edit the introductory adventure. I mean, base game. If you're a player, you don't need to do that, so that's fine. But if you're a dungeon master, yep, good. Save maps in creative mode. Yep, good. Painted minis. Yep, 35 base game. Completely, cool. Yep. No additional cost, 35, fine, put a limit on it. And then we get to Master Tier, 83. I've got 83 painted minis I can have. Okay. Okay, well maybe that's, just how many come with the game. Don't manage to unlock them. Maybe that's just the full, I get everything, right? Maybe there's just 83 minis and that number's going to go up later. Unpainted minis, 60, okay, maybe that's the same. And then you go custom mini slots. You're going to limit how many custom minis I can make too. So it's not that there's only 50 custom minis that I'm limited to how many I'm paying you a subscription and you're going to put hard limits on here? Okay. That was the big warning. That was the big red flag waving around for me here, I've got to say. Where I was going, I'm not sure. That was not the right move at all. To get people on board. That was the bit that frightened me off quite quickly. There's an article here from Arkenforge as well I wanted to take a look at, because there were a lot of signs. There's a lot of signs. What is it here? From its inception, Project Sigil has held a curious place in the tabletop landscape. Niche was incredibly small. Several decisions, both early in development and later in release cycle, held it back. Chasing Baldur's Gate 3, I mean, look. Let's be real here. And I said this very early on amongst my council of dungeon masters, who are also the people that play in my home game. Baldur's Gate was a big problem for them, actually. I mean, it's a good job they made a ton of money off of it, but if you want a video game-like experience that is Dungeons and Dragons, then, I mean, Baldur's Gate is the thing. That is the video game experience. Project Sigil kind of had an identity crisis because, again, as we know from the article from Rascal News, the company were treating it like a video game instead of a VTT, and at no point cared to understand the difference. And if you're treating it like a video game, we have the video game that we need. We have the D&D video game. It is Baldur's Gate 3. So are you trying to recreate Baldur's Gate 3? And if you're not trying to recreate Baldur's Gate 3, then you've got to provide something that is significantly different, and they weren't able to do that with Project Sigil. In fact, it looked like Baldur's Gate 3, which was a problem. So that was a real problem. I think they looked at Baldur's Gate and thought, oh yeah, okay, well we can do that. A high spec engine, again, you cannot assume you can assume for a single player experience that yes, high specs, great. But for a multiplayer experience that for some people will have come from using, the only thing you need was a pen and paper to play this game. And then you're suddenly going to say, well, to play this version of the game with all of the bells and whistles, you're going to need a top-end computer. You've gone from having to spend literally nothing, or barely anything, to play the game, to now having to have a top-spec computer. That was a mistake. Also, no Mac support. So, as I said earlier, 1 in 5 people not going to be able to play. And if a group's sizes are average 5 people, or at least optimized for 5 people in your adventures, which most of the published adventures are, then statistically, 1 person in every D&D group isn't going to be able to use Project Sigil, which therefore means every single group, statistically, wouldn't be using Project Sigil. Assuming a 20% market share of non-Windows PCs. I'm not even going to say Mac. 20% market share of non-Windows, non-work computers are going to be Macs, which I think is a fair assumption. So, statistically, nobody was going to be using Sigil already. Then there's a 3D map building. You have things like Dungeon Alchemist. You have Tailspire. You have all of these things where you can build these 3D maps, which is kind of a high selling point of Project Sigil, and yet it didn't really offer anything different. Apart from if you were going to say, well, look, we can produce the 3D versions of all of these modules, but we're not going to do that. That was the missed opportunity here. So 3D map building wasn't offering anything different. This subscription model, like, look, it's expensive to produce software. The subscription model, I understand the desire for it. And I think if they had just said, well, look, let's add a new tier to D&D Beyond for those that want to use Project Sigil and all of the features, fine. I think that you would have had enough buy-in from people, provided that it wasn't astronomical. But if you said, look, it's going to be, the equivalent of a Netflix subscription, to do that, rather than the $5 or whatever it is for the master tier, double that and you get the 3D VTT, I think most people would have gone, okay, cool. However, you're then also competing with Foundry, where it's a one-time purchase for just the Dungeon Master, nobody else has to pay for it. Tailspire, one-time purchase for everyone, but it is everyone. I think Fantasy Grounds is the same. I think the DM pays more and the players pay less, but again, I think it's one-time purchase, but I think there is a subscription. But the point is, the access to VTTs is very cheap compared to what they would have had to charge to keep Project Sigil up and running. Now, I'm wondering what the Arkan Forge's take is on the Project Sigil demo, because I didn't think it was too bad. So they ran a stage game. There's a video here. I won't link to it or whatever, but the cast performed fantastically, putting on a performance, but the attending star of the show, Project Sigil, came off looking second best. The game came to a stop multiple times as the cast figured out how the software worked. Oh, maybe I watched an edited version then. Maybe that's why it seemed to come off very well. Plus showing an entire group of players sitting around a table staring at their screens. Yes, that I do agree with, and that was one of the concerns when they first started promoting it. It was like, I don't want to see my D&D players looking at screens. Like, I want my D&D players to be engaging with each other, not screens. So I will agree with that. That was definitely not good. So the demo failed to show the best parts of the platform while highlighting how it can negatively impact both the game and the atmosphere. And that I would agree with. And I suppose if that's what they're talking about in terms of a disaster of a launch or a demo, then yes, I'd agree. This lack of marketing, man. This showed to me very much so just how much there was not a desire from Wizards of the Coast to promote this. Like, it was dead on arrival, and I highlighted this in our Discord. I was like, there's no fanfare that this thing has launched. Like, nothing. And they've pumped millions. 20 to 30 million is what Rascal News quote. I've heard, add another zero onto, well, not another zero, but another digit onto that figure. So we're talking at least 100 million is what I've heard of the investment in terms of the development. Because software development, certainly video game software development, is not cheap. And this is essentially video game development. Although it's not a video game, it is that sort of territory we're looking at. Although that being said, what they've produced so far does feel to me more like the 20 to 30 million that Rascal are reporting. But I have heard from people with connections to Hasbro, including Stephen Glicker of Roll for Combat, that actually it's closer to like 100 million. So I don't know. But Rascal are reporting 20 to 30. I will trust their journalism. And then they didn't market the fact that it launched. This was like flagship product. And then obviously the Project Sigil developers laid off. Now look, we are in a position where history has repeated itself. And I'm shocked, quite frankly, that this is a surprise to the people at Hasbro. Because for those of us who have been around in this hobby for long enough, remember the 4th edition fanfare that came up. 4th edition, one of the big features of it was that there was going to be D&D Insider integration, which was a subscription service where you had a character builder, you could design your mini. There was going to be a 3D VTT that came with it. That was kind of part of the package. Like, that was the whole thing. Like, the actual books themselves were only a part of the experience. The full experience was going to be the digital offerings that came with it. And then 4th edition died on the vine. I heard that some tragic events happened with the lead developer of the VTT, so I'm not going to blame Hasbro entirely for that. But Hasbro never picked it up again because reasons. I think the lead developer, I believe there was a very tragic accident, and he didn't make it, unfortunately. So I think that's what killed it. But they didn't rehire anybody. They didn't pick it up. They just let it go. And in some ways, that's what's happening here. Hasbro do not have a good track record as a software company. And they have tried and tried and tried over the decades many times to become a digital company. And they have failed every time. And this, I'm afraid to say, is another failure in that long list of digital failures from Hasbro. Because they're a toy company. They're not a video game company. And yes, they might be hiring people that have worked in software and worked in video games, but that is not what the company does. And it is a big shift to move a company from things that sell, a company that sells lumps of plastic and board games, into something which sells video games. And as I say, I think ultimately Hasbro here is cancelling Sigil. There's no two ways about it here. Sigil is dead here at this point. They've decided that it is not going to be of value to them, and they're not going to make the money that they thought they were going to make. And maybe Simon, who commented earlier, was right. Maybe the feedback was overwhelming, that no, we don't want microtransactions. And I agree. We don't want microtransactions in this hobby. We want to be able to play our book, and you can tear it from our cold, dead hands, because we are going to continue to play it for years and years and years to come, whether or not Hasbro wants us to. And that is the hobby. I did a video on Insight Check, our Patreon and YouTube member weekly show, last week, saying about how I am a little bit concerned for the future of Dungeon Masters as a core part of this hobby. And I'm relieved, to be honest, that Chris Cox was not excited by Sigil when he saw it. Again, I feel terrible for the people that have lost their jobs. I want to kind of separate the two things, my own personal feelings about whether or not it was good for the hobby, and also the poor people that have lost their jobs and who are working on a passion project from the sounds of things, And I really feel for them, and I hope they manage to find work and everything. But as for the actual intent from the executives for Sigil, this was going to be a microtransaction, Magic Arena style app that they were creating, that they were hoping was going to make a ton of money, like some of the other things that they put out. Monopoly Go that came out recently is one of the most successful software launches in history when you look at income. Baldur's Gate was a huge success. But they're used to creating bits of software, putting it out there, or rather paying other people to create bits of software, putting it out there, and then making a ton of money, right? That is the culture of Hasbro as it comes to digital products. And that's not what they got here. This was something that was going to require a lot of ongoing work and a lot of continued investment. And they decided, for whatever reason, that it wasn't worth the investment. I don't know how they came to that conclusion. I still am baffled that they managed to balls this up. Because to me, this was an opportunity for them to print money, which I think is where a lot of people in the community were so concerned for so long. Because actually, from a financial standpoint, this seemed like a dead cert for them to print money, and the more that was going to print money, the more they were going to double down as that being the core D&D experience and trying to bring people in. But that's not happened. And I do think that's better for the hobby as a whole. But I do think Sigil's dead. I think it's going to go the way of the encounter builder in D&D Beyond, where it's going to be one of those things that people use every now and then. But I think when you don't have full features on a 3D VTT, you're going to be fighting the system. I use Foundry, I use that as a VTT, and sometimes you do have to fight with it, and that is very full featured. In fact, I've completely customized the whole setup for it, but you do fight it sometimes, and that's something that is very full featured because so much is supported by the community, and things that Hasbro would never produce a feature for Sigil is in there, and I'm still fighting it. So imagine how much I'm going to be fighting Sigil when, and look, as I say, you have to put hours of prep into a VTT. For a 2D VTT, imagine how long it's going to take you to do all that prep for a 3D VTT, and they've only given you 5 sets of things. And from the sounds of things, from what Rascal News is reporting, the only thing that they're going to be doing now, what was it? We will maintain a small team to sustain Sigil and release products already developed at no additional cost to users. Now, this is a very telling bit in the statement. We will transition Sigil to a D&D Beyond feature. We will maintain a small team to sustain Sigil, so basically make sure that it's still working, and release products already developed at no additional cost to users. So what they're saying here is once the stuff that's been developed is released, that's it. No new stuff unless people start using Sigil. And I don't know how much stuff there is that is still to come down the pipeline that's already developed, but I can't imagine it's a lot based on what we've got at launch here. After 2 or 3 years of active development, I can't imagine there's a lot of asset packs to come. And if there are no asset packs, then people aren't going to use it because they're not going to be able to create the things that they want to create when they could go to Tailspire and create that instead. And I love Tailspire. Tailspire is beautiful. And to me, I think that is them ultimately admitting here that it's done. It's over. It is dead on arrival, as some people are saying, and I agree. And I do think, in the long run, I do sadly think that it is better for the hobby that way. But it was clear to me at launch that Wizards of the Coast had no faith in this, because it was such a dead launch. I think maybe Chris Cox's intention may very well be to do some Hollywood accounting and write this off as a financial loss for tax purposes because he can't see the full potential in it, which is really strange for me because he's been touting AI, and I do think that if this had been a success, one of the things that he would have pushed for was AI built into it so that the whole game could run for you without the need for a dungeon master. But perhaps he came to the realization that the generative AI that we have is nowhere near good enough to deliver that, and maybe that's why he pulled the plug, because he couldn't see how you could connect the two together. I don't know. A lot of guesswork for me. But again, there is a big giveaway for me that they realized very early on that this wasn't going to make the sort of money that they wanted, which suggests to me that there was politics in the development team. And that's something I didn't mention. When that proved to not be the case, I want to come back to this. They wanted it to make money simply by existing. When that proved not to be the case, Hasbro pushed Sigil out the nest. Well, it suggests to me that they realised that that wasn't going to be the case before it even launched. And if they realised that it wasn't the case before it even launched, that suggests to me that there was some pushback from the internal team saying, no, we don't want to push. All of the feedback is saying to us they don't want microtransactions. So we need to find another way to make the money. And I think maybe that's what happened here. But ultimately, it is dead. Sigil is over. They're protecting their investment to a degree, making sure that it's workable, but otherwise it is over for Project Sigil here, as far as I can see. I hope everybody that, as I say, has lost their jobs here is going to find new work, either within Wizards of the Coast or elsewhere. I applaud all the work that they've done, because I think actually what they put together in terms of aesthetic and the potential for it was great, but it was clearly a rush launch, and that's where I'm disappointed in Project Sigil, to be frank. But I do think that it was better for the hobby as a whole. That this is how it's gone, and now I think the TTRPG community can breathe a sigh of relief that D&D is now not going to be turned into a video game anymore, and perhaps it means that we can go back to loving 5th edition, because I gotta say that the D&D 2024 rules, I really like them. I really like them. I think I'm running 2 campaigns now on the 2024 rules, and I'm really enjoying them. Monsters are hitting hard, but there was always that kind of spectre when running D&D 24 of like, am I being lured into loving D&D as a video game rather than as a TTRPG? And now that spectre is gone, really, and that means that I can now enjoy Dungeons & Dragons 2024, and it also means that perhaps, though they're going to lean into D&D Beyond and selling the digital products, perhaps the books that I love so much, these physical books that I can hold in my hand and nobody can update without my permission, These things are perhaps here to stay as their collector's items. And hey, we might even get some even fancier premium covers, just so they can charge us a premium for really beautiful books. And you know what? I'll happily pay for a really fancy, pretty book. I'll pay them that extra $5, $10 or however much, because I love a pretty book, and these are very beautiful books. So maybe that's how they can monetize things and the licensing stuff, but keep the microtransactions to yourselves, Hasbro. And thankfully, we can say with confidence that at least for now, that is not on the horizon. At least that's what I think. But do let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you for those that did tune in live. I saw people popping in and out. And indeed also to Simon for your comment earlier. Greatly received as well. But for now, Project Sigil, RIP.